We're so pleased to have with us now Tom Campbell, former state finance director, former state senator, former congressman, and now with Chapman University. And Tom, your work as a state finance director in the early 2000s, I believe. Talk about Prop 13 though, because you like me are kind of a nerd about the finance numbers in the state of California and what's happening. So Prop 13, how important has historic Prop 13 passed in 1978, how important has that been for the economy and for the business community in California?
There's very little more important than that. And the reason is that the tax situation for businesses in California does not make it an attractive state to locate.
No.
And so when I was finance director, it was my privilege to make the pitch to companies that were contemplating coming to California or Arizona or Texas or Washington State, why they should come to California. And it was a hard argument to make because our taxes are so high. But Prop 13, passed in 1978, was the one beacon of hope. And it was a great comparative advantage. When a company decides to come to California, many times it's going to design build. Sometimes they acquire a property that's already been built. But most of the time they are considering, at least the large corporations, maybe they will build a facility. It was particularly true in the growth of Silicon Valley when wafer fabrication plants were being built. And so they have to cost out what happens to the business as the tax on property is assessed year in, year out. In every other state but us, it was a risk.
Yeah. Because
you might build a building and you might understand its cost and the assessment might be 1%. And next year the state might say, well, it's 1.5%. And the state runs into a revenue shortfall 2 years later and it might be 2%. That was not possible once Prop 13 passed in California. And the key here is that Prop 13 applied to business property as well as residential property. I think most people think of Prop 13 as a way to save older folks from having to sell their home just to pay the taxes on it, to allow folks of my age to stay in our homes. But that's important as can be. But the business side is the focus that I had when I was finance director and when I was state senator and congressman. So that's at risk if we undo Prop 13. And that's what's going to be on the ballot this November.
Yeah, I tell people who think, oh, business communities aren't going to bother me all that much. I always ask people about, going to the stores. What do you think the trickle down is going to be for people who want to, just go in and buy their milk and their diapers or get their nails done or take their dogs to the vet? If they do split commercial property off, what kind of effect do you think that's going to have on small businesses?
Devastating. And the reason is that small businesses in general, you can take sector by sector, but in general, operate on a very narrow margin. Certainly ma and pa grocery stores, very narrow margin. Gasoline retailers, very narrow margin. So if you have a very narrow margin and you suddenly have an increase in real estate taxes, which you have to pay every year, you don't have any place to go except to the consumer. So think of it with gasoline prices in California, already
the worst,
the highest in the country. Now, if you figure in the increased real estate tax that the corner gasoline station owner will have to pass along to consumers, it's devastating to all of us who depend on the gas for our cars. So California, we know, very car dependent, very individual transportation dependent, and it goes directly to the consumer if the cost of real estate taxes is increased.
Well, Prop 15 is the split roll initiative that will split the commercial property off from the regular property tax rolls and do it differently. That's on the ballot in November. So I'm assuming you're not in favor of Prop 15.
Oh, very much against it. Very much against it. Why can't we just leave something good? Wouldn't it be great if California said to the country and the world, come to California, build a building, and you will know exactly how much your taxes will be 20 years from now, 30 years from now. That was a great message from 1978 to 2020.
Yeah.
And now we're going to confuse the message.
Yeah.
I can't understand why. If you ask what other sources of revenue there are, I can give you what the alternatives are. We certainly have business tax, we have income tax, We have the sales tax. I think California's revenue sources are poorly balanced.
Completely agree.
And what we need is a more steady, less up and down spike. We are an up and down spike revenue state because so much depends on the personal
Right.
income tax. And we have no preference for capital gains. So if the market does well, the revenue shoots up. If the market does not, it shoots down. There's many alternatives is my point. But don't take away the one comparative advantage we have when dealing with California versus locating a business in another state.
Yeah, completely agree. OC Tax is completely agrees. Tom, thank you so much for speaking with us
My
today.
pleasure, and thank you and all OC Tax for what you do.
Thank you.